Hi, welcome to my channel. It's nearly Halloween. It's my favorite time of year, so I thought I'd do a video on haunted places in Ireland. There are so many places around the country that are full of ghost sightings and supernatural activity. So I'm going to do my top 10, and make sure you stay tuned for number 1 because I'm scared to even talk about it. It's terrifying. If you like this kind of thing, please give this video a like, subscribe for more, and let's get started. First up at number 10 is Charles Fort. This was a fort built by the British military in Cork in the 17th century to protect from attacks from the harbour. It has witnessed a lot of battles and wars and is said to be haunted by the ghost of the White Lady of Kinsale. The legend of the White Lady is that she was the daughter of the commander of the fort, Governor Warrender. Her name was Wilful Warrender, and she fell in love with one of the soldiers at the fort, Sir Trevor Ashurst. The two were married, and on the night of their wedding they were walking around the fort and Wilful noticed some beautiful flowers on the rocks below. Trevor said, "I'll get them for you." He was taking off his jacket so he could climb down the rocks, and another soldier said, "Here, I'll go get them. It's your wedding, you rest, and if you just mind my post, you stand guard for me, I'll go get the flowers." So he started to climb down the rocks. Wilful said, "Okay, I'm gonna go to bed, I'll see you inside," and Sir Trevor went to stand watch. Unfortunately, he had had a lot of drink, he was tired from the festivities, and he fell asleep. The rule of the fort was that any soldier caught sleeping on duty was to be shot immediately. Minutes later, Governor Warrender came along and found the soldier asleep at his post. It was dark, so he didn't see who it was. He called out to try and wake him, but Trevor didn't hear him and stayed asleep. So Governor Warrender took out his gun and shot him through the heart. Only afterwards did he realize it was his new son-in-law. Wilful was woken with the news. Her father had just killed her new husband. She was so devastated, she ran out, threw herself from the tower of the fort, killing herself on the rocks below. And then her father was so heartbroken that he had done this, he took a gun and shot himself. So one wedding led to 3 funerals. Today it is said that Wilful's ghost roams the fort looking for her beloved, and she is dressed in her wedding dress, hence the name the White Lady of Kinsale. She's said to be friendly to women and children, will wave at them, but she is not friendly towards men, especially military men. There have been lots of sightings about her, but she's seen most commonly going up the stairs in the fort to where her room was that night. And some reported sightings of her. There was one time 2 soldiers were getting ready to go off somewhere. They were packing their bags and one of the daughters was there, and she said, "Who's that nice lady on the banister?" And they turned, there was no one there, but she insisted, "No, she's in white and she's waving, she's so pretty." And yeah, that must have been the ghost. There was no one there. And then on another occasion, a nanny saw her in the children's nursery. There was a little boy asleep in bed, and she watched the White Lady walk over, stand over him, look down at him, and reach over to his arm. And as she touched his arm, he woke screaming, "Get your cold hand off me!" But she's nice to children and women, but with men, she has been known to push them over banisters and knock them unconscious. So yeah, be careful if you're a military man. It's no longer a fort, it's now a national monument, so you can go and visit it and see if you can find the White Lady of Kinsale. Next up at number 9 is Duckett's Grove. This is the ruins of an old manor house. It was built in 1745 by the wealthy Ducket family, and it was one of the grandest and biggest mansions in Ireland. One day, the man of the house, William Ducket, was taking a horse ride with his mistress when she fell from her horse and was killed. Her mother was grief-stricken, devastated, and called a curse, a pishogue, on the family. And this pishogue meant that they would have grief and misfortune and bad luck in their family. And not long after that, a banshee's wailing began to be heard around the house. A banshee is a spirit whose wails signify death. I do have a video coming up with loads of details and stories about banshees, so hit that notification bell if you don't want to miss it. And so this banshee's wails were being heard. One girl heard it and she died. A gardener heard it and his mother died. So and this banshee was attached to the family. The house was left in ruins after a fire in 1933, but still today you can hear the banshee along with other paranormal activity. People see the ghost of William still riding along the grounds on his horse before disappearing into thin air. And when people stand in the spot that used to be the kitchen, they can still hear the hustle and bustle of what once was there. There's orbs, there's strange sounds, strange lights. Yeah, definitely an eerie one. At number 8 is Belvelly Castle, which is a castle in County Cork, and it's said to be home to 2 resident ghosts. The first is Lucero Moreno, an Italian-Spanish poet and songwriter who was shipwrecked off the coast of Ireland and was given refuge in the castle. He was young and handsome and talented, so the lady of the house was immediately taken with him. Unfortunately, she already had a suitor in the house named Dion, so there was immediate rivalry between these two men. And the lady wanted to end the rivalry, so she said, okay, let's have a competition. Let's have a battle without weapons. Whoever can perform the best song wins, they get to stay, and the loser has to leave the castle. So of course Lucero wins, and Dion is furious. So he gets a knife and he goes for Lucero, but Lucero manages to grab the knife from him and stabs Dion in the neck, killing him. The family are furious about this and they lock Lucero up in the tower, giving him only bread and water. One of the servant girls was in love with Dion and she was heartbroken that he was murdered, so she poisoned Lucero's food and he died. Hundreds of years later, a human skeleton was found wrapped in chains when they were doing work on the castle in the riverbed right beside it, and it's said to be Lucero. And Lucero's ghost is said to be seen on a full moon night, sitting up in the tower, looking at the moon, singing a song in an unknown language, probably Spanish or Italian, and whoever hears the song says it's absolutely enchanting. The other ghost is said to be Margaret Hodnett, the daughter of the family that lived in the castle in the 17th century. She was said to be very beautiful and had a love of mirrors. There were mirrors all around the castle for her to admire herself, and she was also a heartbreaker. Men would fall in love with her and she would play with them for a little while and then decide she was finished, and there was one man who was not happy about this. His name was Clon Rockenby, and he was in love with Margaret, but she wasn't really interested in him. She'd call on him when she was bored and then send him away when she was finished with him. And so he decided he was going to starve the castle until she agreed to marry him. So he marched there with an army and would only allow in the most basic rations just to keep them alive. And no one knows why she didn't give in or why her father didn't demand she gave in, but this went on for 2 years. After 2 years, Clon decided, I've had enough, and we're stopping even the most basic rations from getting through until she agrees to marry me. After 2 weeks, she finally agreed to marry him, and so the doors were opened and he went in and he was revolted by rotting corpses. So many members of her family had died from this starvation. I don't think he realized the damage that he was doing on the inside. And he went and he found Margaret, and she had lost all of her beauty. It had been 2 years of pure stress, not enough food. She was skeletal, her eyes were sunken, and he decided, he changed his mind. He didn't want to marry her anymore. He turned to leave, smashed a mirror on his way out, and her brother grabbed a sword, ran after him and killed him. And Margaret was said to have gone mad at this point, and she got rid of all the mirrors in the castle, and she died not long after that. And her ghost is said to still roam the castle today. People that have seen her have described her as either having no face or a thick veil so you can't see her face, and she's been seen walking along and then rubbing certain stones on the walls, and those stones you can actually see they're a lot more polished. They've been rubbed a lot more than others, and it's suspected that that's where the mirrors once hung. Unfortunately, Belvelly Castle is now a private residence, so you can't go into this one in search of her. Next up at number 7 is Charleville Castle. This castle was built in County Offaly in the early 1800s. The land that it was built on was said to be the location for ancient Druid practices, and a lot of wars and battles had been fought there, so it was already strong for paranormal activity. The resident ghost is a little girl called Harriet. In 1861, Harriet was 8 years old, and she was sent upstairs by her nanny to get ready for dinner. On her way back down, she decided instead of walking the stairs, she was going to slide down the banister. Unfortunately, she fell over and fell several flights down and was killed instantly. So many visitors over the years claim to have seen her, and they all describe her the same, a little girl dressed in white and blue. People that have stayed in the castle over the years have also reported being woken in the middle of the night to a little girl singing and then screaming, and it's been thought that that's Harriet replaying her death. She's also said to be accompanied by a little boy, most likely to be her cousin Henry. He died age 7 in London, and his mother brought his body home to be buried in the family vault. And the two children like playing tricks on people, you know, locking people in rooms, playing hide and seek, and they also like playing with other children that stay in the castle. And Charleville Castle has been featured on a lot of paranormal investigation TV shows, and is also the set for a lot of movies like The Night Before Christmas with Vanessa Hudgens. Next up at number 6 is Drumbeg Manor. Not much is known about the history of this house, but it is an abandoned manor house in County Donegal, and it was built in the early 1800s. By the end of the century, it was turned into a hotel before becoming an orphanage, before becoming an old folks retirement home. This one has the least information about resident ghosts, but is said to be extremely paranormal and one of the most haunted houses in Europe. Visitors have seen a man in a white suit walking the halls, and at night a woman can be heard screaming. At number 5 is Kinnitty Castle, and I personally have experience with this one. I was taking photos there and every photo had orbs in them, and then one time all of my electronics suddenly died, and a guy that I was with swears that a door slammed on him in his hotel room. I absolutely love it there. I love Kinnitty Castle, but it definitely has an eerie vibe. On the grounds, lots of castles have been built, knocked down, rebuilt, knocked down, rebuilt, dating back to 350 AD, so a lot of history here. And in the 14th century, an abbey was built on the grounds, and one of the resident ghosts is a monk, probably from the abbey, named Hugh, and he likes to hang out in the banquet hall where weddings take place, and he's supposed to be very friendly but very sinister looking. He's tall, he wears a black cloak, and you can't really see his face. And one of the hotel rooms in particular, the Geraldine room, is supposed to be very haunted. Visitors have said they've seen a little girl or a woman. If you actually go on TripAdvisor and look up Kinnitty Castle and read some of the reviews, you can see people talking about their scary encounters. Next up at number 4 is Loftus Hall. This was built in County Wexford in around 1350 by the Redmond family, who named it Redmond Hall. Around 300 years later, it was taken from the Redmond family and given to English planters, the Loftus family, who renamed it Loftus Hall. English planters are English people that came over to Ireland to live on land confiscated from Irish people. The Redmond family fought hard to keep their home, but they were unsuccessful, and it wasn't a great thing to happen, so not a great start for Loftus Hall. In the 18th century, a young man called to the house seeking refuge from a storm, and he ended up staying for an extended period. The daughter of the family, Anne, and the young man were very taken with each other and said they were falling in love, spent a lot of time together, until one day Anne realized that he had hooves instead of feet and he was secretly the devil. When she discovered this, he burst into a fireball and shot up through the roof, leaving a hole in the ceiling, and that hole is still there today. It's said that after this, Anne went mad and locked herself in the tapestry room, where she would rock herself with her knees clung under her chin, staring out the window if he was to ever return. And then she died not long after this, and her family felt that there was something sinister, there was hauntings, there was something around. They called in a priest to perform an exorcism, but that still didn't stop things. And many of the sightings were of a young woman who fit Anne's description. They said she was tall and thin, and she would walk through the tapestry room, stop at the bed, and then walk away and disappear. Many visitors would be put up in the tapestry room not knowing its history and would run out screaming in the middle of the night. In the late 19th century, the house was being renovated and a baby skeleton was found concealed in the walls of the house, and the likely truth of what really happened came out. Anne and the young man most likely had an affair, she became pregnant, and he took off and left her alone. The Loftus family didn't want the shame of an unmarried pregnant woman, so they locked her away in the tapestry room to conceal the pregnancy. It's not known when Anne or the baby died, but most likely if they didn't have medical care, it could have been during childbirth. After the renovation of the house, the hauntings continued, and visitors reported things like their hair being pulled, scratches on their arm, a lot of sinister things. At the moment, Loftus Hall is closed, but it's said to be reopening soon as a hotel. Next up at number 3 is the Hellfire Club. This one is the ruins of a hunting club in the Dublin Mountains, and stories of hauntings and scary things happening have been circulating for centuries. It was built in 1725 by one of Ireland's richest men, William Connolly. He chose the position on a hill because it had a great view. However, there was an ancient tomb already there. He didn't care though. He ordered his workers to dismantle the ancient tomb and use those stones to build his hunting club. After its completion, the roof was blown off. Some people say the roof was blown off by the devil, who was enraged. Locals said it was because he disturbed the ancient tomb, so that was payback. But Connolly didn't care. He ordered that the roof be rebuilt with stone this time so that wouldn't happen again, and you can still see the stone roof there to this day. A few years later, it was sold to the Hellfire Club, who used it as their meeting place. The Hellfire Club were known for their amoral behavior and debauchery with sex and alcohol, but also with Satanism and devil worshipping. It was said that they would have masses in which cats and servants were sacrificed. There are lots of stories about things that happened there. One in particular, one young man, he was curious about the kind of things that would go on in there. So he went down, he was invited in to play a game of cards. He dropped a card, and as he bent down to pick it up, he realized one of the other men had hooves instead of feet and was actually the devil, similar to the other story. And then another time, a young man was peeking around trying to see what was going on. So they said, okay, you want to come in and witness what we do? So they brought him in, and he was found the next morning trembling in fear down by a river, and he never spoke again because of whatever he witnessed. It was burned down, and in the 1960s restoration work was being done, but workers that were working on restoring it would run away terrified because of a black cat with red eyes and other things, supernatural things that would happen. There's been a lot of reports, especially at nighttime, of strange smells and strange things happening, and so you can go up and see the ruins yourself if you dare. Next up at number 2 is Kilmainham Gaol. This was built in 1796 in Dublin, and it was a prison not only for men but also women and children, and conditions were terrible. It was always overcrowded and had no heating and no light. Throughout the years, many leaders and fighters in the Irish rebellions against British rule were imprisoned here, starting all the way back from the 1798 rebellion and ending with the 1916 rising. It was a brutal place, and it's known as a hotbed for paranormal activity. Executions took place here right from the start all the way up to the finish. The earliest executions were hangings, which were done publicly at the gate as a warning to those on the outside, and the last executions were the firing squad that killed the leaders of the 1916 rising. A lot of prisoners were fighters for Irish freedom, but others were murderers, and some were just petty criminals, including children, one being only 7 years old. And all of these men, women and children would be cramped in one tiny, dark, cold cell with one candle to last them 2 weeks. The jail closed in 1924, and it's now a museum. Dan McGill was the man who was overseeing the restoration of the jail, and he experienced a lot of supernatural activity. On one occasion, he turned off the lights of the chapel and went to his room. Back in his room, he saw the lights were turned back on. He went over, there was no one around, turned the lights back off, went back again, they were turned back on. This just kept happening, so he said, okay, look, whatever wants these lights on, I'll leave it, you can have them on. And this was a regular occurrence. Another occasion, a worker was doing some painting in the dungeon and he felt a gust of wind, and then he was pinned, pushed against the wall. He was absolutely terrified. There have been so many more unexplained things. People hear children's voices, footsteps. People have been pushed over in the museum. A group of children refused to go in one time because they saw something. And so yeah, a lot of just very spooky, eerie things. And as I said, it's a museum now if you want to go and check it out. And at number 1 is Loftus Castle. This is said to be the most haunted castle in the world. It was built in the early 1200s by the O'Bannon clan, and it was called Leap of the O'Bannons because before the castle was even built, 2 of the O'Bannon brothers were arguing over who would be the chieftain of the clan, and they decided they would both leap from the rocky outcrop where the castle was going to be built, and whoever survived would be the chieftain. So already a very dark beginning. Soon after, the castle was passed to the O'Carroll clan, and the O'Carroll clan were said to be very brutal and violent. And as the castle was passed down through generations of the O'Carroll clan, it experienced a lot of gruesome murders, of violent things, battles, wars. A lot of very violent things happened there. One of the most haunted parts of the castle is the Bloody Chapel, and what happened here is one of the O'Carroll brothers was a priest and he was performing mass, and one of his brothers came in and slaughtered him in the middle of mass, and that's how it got its name, the Bloody Chapel. But this is not the worst thing that happened there. In the 1900s, there was work being done excavating the castle, and workers found a hidden room off one of the corners of the Bloody Chapel, and they opened it and they found skeletal remains impaled on wooden spikes. And what happened was these people were thrown or dropped from a trapdoor above, fall down and would land on these wooden spikes and would die a slow, excruciating death. And it took the workers 3 cartloads to remove all of the skeletal remains. Another event that happened here, and this rivals the Red Wedding, is the O'Carroll clan were fighting in a battle, but they needed help. So they hired 40 members of the McMahon clan to help them. So they won the battle and they came back to the castle to celebrate and have dinner, but the O'Carroll clan decided they didn't want to pay the men they hired. So instead they poisoned 40 men at the dinner and killed them. And this apparently wasn't the only time they did this. They did this with other clans too. So a lot of very traumatic deaths happened in this castle. In the 17th century, the castle was taken from the O'Carroll clan and given to Jonathan Darby, an English soldier under Cromwell, as a thank you for your military service. And he wasn't just given the castle, he was given all the lands surrounding the castle on which Irish people lived, and they now had to pay him rent. And Jonathan Darby was quick to maintain the violent nature of the previous members of Loftus Castle, and one of the first things he did was take 2 servants to bury some treasure, and as soon as it was hidden and buried, he murdered the 2 servants. They would never tell anyone where the treasure was, and then he forgot where it was, so it's said to still be hidden somewhere in the grounds today. The castle remained in the Darby family until 1922, when the heir, another Jonathan Darby, decided to raise the rents of the Irish people by 30%. However, it was around the time of the Civil War, tensions were high, and the Irish people decided they had enough, and they burned down the castle because they did not want to see it any longer in the hands of someone who swore allegiance to the British Crown. So Loftus Castle was an empty shell for years, but then in the late 20th century, restoration work was done, and it's said that all of the previous ghosts have remained. There are so many ghosts here and so many sightings, but I'll just run through a few of them. There is the murdered woman. This is a woman that appears absolutely terrified. She is scantily dressed, running, and she screams twice before disappearing into thin air. And she was said to be murdered by the O'Carrolls. Then there's the Red Lady, a woman who is dressed in red, has long brown hair, and she carries around a knife menacingly. It's said that she was kidnapped by the O'Carrolls and assaulted, became pregnant, and when the baby was born, the O'Carrolls killed the baby. So she grabbed the knife and ended her own life too, and now she haunts the castle carrying this knife. Then there are two little girls called Emily and Charlotte, who are often seen playing together in the main hall. It's said that when Emily was 11, she fell from one of the castle walls and died. And there have been lots of reports of seeing a little girl falling from one of the castle walls, but disappearing before she hit the ground. So that's probably Emily. Then there's the governess, who seems to like blonde visitors. And then there's two soldiers that have been seen breaking a woman's arm. There are so many reports of all of these ghosts and even more, but the most terrifying was said to be invoked by Mildred Darby in the early 1900s. She liked to dabble in black magic, black arts, so she apparently awakened this terrifying spirit called the Elemental, or some people know it as It. It wasn't human like the other ghosts, it was a creature, and it was very sinister and terrifying. It was always accompanied by the smell of rotting. It's said to be the only truly evil spirit in the house. There are a lot of stories I could tell you about it, but unfortunately I don't have time in this video. But while I was reading about it, I was really scared, and then the power in my house went out, and it was a storm, and it was pitch black, and I was absolutely terrified. I was so scared trying to find candles in the pitch black, having just read all of these stories about the elemental. So yeah, a very scary one. And that's it. They are my top 10 most haunted places in Ireland. I have way more. I was thinking I could do a series on this, so let me know if you want to see more in the comments below, and also if there's anything you want me to focus on, let me know and I'll include them in the next video. And that's it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, please subscribe, and thanks for watching. Bye.